Yes, you are.
Hi, everybody. Good evening, everybody. A very warm welcome from Manish Dev by the team SecureNow. Today, the topic for the webinar will be cyber security insurance. So before we start, let me give a brief introduction about myself, and then I can start with the topic. I am Manish Dev. I head underwriting and products in SecureNow Insurance Broker. I've been with the organization for close to 4.5 years. Before that, I was with HCL Technologies. Before that, with NIT Limited, and before that, with Hindustan Petroleum. So that's now the very brief background about myself. I'll start with the presentation. Cyber liability insurance. Now, in the next half an hour, 45 odd minutes, I'll talk about the various coverages. Why should you have cyber liability insurance? What is the need for cyber liability insurance in today's world? And in what all cases are the claims payable? Along with some examples of recent past where the claims were payable and the amounts that were payable, so that you get a holistic example of cyber liability insurance, and also understand the need of buying a cyber liability insurance. So if you look at this slide, a very interesting slide, the left side of this slide, this one talks about the different security threats that exist. Obviously, security threats can be both through natural factors and also through the human factors. Here we will focus on the human factors. The human factors are two front: the internal factors and the external factors. The internal factors are where the threats are from your former employees and also from your existing employees. So it can be uh, there are people who have ill intentions and then would want to harm your organization. So both former employees and current employees can do that. Now, coming to external factors, that's where majority of the security threats originate and are derived, are the external factors. Let's focus on that. These can be your malicious events. These can be, hackers and crackers cracking into your system, getting into your system, and then leaving viruses or trojans into your system, so that your complete server gets blocked and your systems are then not able to function. And because of that, obviously, then your business takes a hit. Now, with all this in mind, uh, why do you, for that matter, why do we need a cyber security in the first place? Like, people say data is the new oil. And if data is the new oil, you have to make sure that you protect this oil. Uh, right now, all your complete businesses are online. So be it on social media, be it on online platforms, all your businesses run and derive and function on the ecosystem that is online. So it becomes very, very important that we have a cyber security in place. Also, the risk, in case if it is from insiders, like I mentioned, if the risk is from, say, some of your employees or from internally within your organization, it becomes very difficult for the organization to ensure a 360-degree safeguard. And nobody can protect themselves, neither can you foresee yourself of risk coming through such scenarios. And hence, it becomes important that we have a cyber security for the organization. Apart from the direct monetary losses, by direct monetary losses, I mean, the cost that is required to get your system live. A lot of hidden costs are included, the cost of data breaches, which include your business opportunity lost. Then obviously, then there is a reputation that gets soured. Your customers, your service providers might take a hit because of this reputation. And hence, the cost, both directly and indirectly, are large when there's a cyber attack. When there's a cyber attack. So again, look at this slide carefully. It talks about two events. One, what are the incidences that can trigger a cyber incident? First, that's the right side of the presentation. The left side of the presentation talks about what is then at stake, like I mentioned in the previous slide. So what are the triggers for a cyber incident? The triggers can be manifold, and by the triggers, I mean, once there's a cyber attack, what can go wrong? There can be a system failure. Your services can become unavailable. Your services can become unavailable both for your third-party vendors and also, for that matter, for a lot of your customers who are then dependent on services. For example, ICICI Direct. So if ICICI Direct has a cyber attack, large number of its customer base then gets impacted by that. Your networks can be locked. There can be a network lockdown. Your databases can be encrypted. So the triggers are multifold. And because the triggers are multifold, what is at stake is also multifold. So look at the left side, the economic cost. Obviously, when your servers are down, you're unable to do business. And because you're unable to do business, there's a revenue loss, and hence then there is also a profit loss. There's a reputation damage. There can be a lot of legal implications in terms of if there is a data breach and then the data goes to the public, a lot of litigations can then follow. So there's a reputation damage that is involved. Customer retention becomes a problem. If a bank, for example, if a ICICI bank or a SBI bank has frequent cyber attacks, I'm pretty sure you and me will not be confident of continuing our services with that particular bank, because we are very, very sure that the next data breach might lead to our data getting exposed to the public. And obviously, with all of this at stake, the legal consequences then increases, because once there are cyber attacks and there are breaches in the system, multiple litigations and legal suits will follow. So it becomes important that we have a cyber security in place. And because with that, followed by that, we also have a cyber liability insurance that covers all of your costs that I just spoke of. Look at this slide, a very interesting slide. Look at again the right side. I've taken this slide from two different insurers. So if you look at the right side, there is a lot of information from Tata AIG, where in the year 2018, this is a list of data and details that were captured in the year 2018. If you see, the triggers that caused, or the events though that caused the cyber attacks in Tata AIG clients were business email compromises. Somebody has compromised your email. For example, you were required to make a payment to a supplier with the account details being mentioned in that mail, and somebody compromised your email ID, and with everything being replicated, he changed the account details. So the business email compromises, that's the largest chunk. 23% of the incidences, the claims were because of this source. 18% through ransomware. Ransomware are simple, threats. If you don't pay us, say for example, 1,000 bitcoins or $1,000, we will not let your system function. So that's called as a ransomware attack. 14% were through data breaches by hackers, where the hackers breach into data, they start deleting your data, they start making sure that the data gets corrupted. All of that happens. That's part of the data breach by hackers. Also, due to employee negligence, a very, very important part, data breach due to employee negligence, employees who are part of your organization. And we can be very, very sure that no employee, no organization can take 100% precautions against employee negligence, because wherever there are humans involved, employee negligence is bound to happen. Also, look at the right side of the part. These are the industries according to which the businesses have been impacted. 22% through KPO, BPO, IT, etc. A lot of in the hospitality services, a lot of it in the public entity sector. So no industry is safe, no domain is safe, and hence it becomes very, very critical that if you're running an organization which has a presence online, if your businesses are online, if your transactions are online, if your service providers and your customers are online, a cyber liability insurance is a must, because the cost and the ramifications of that cost is very, very large. Look at the left side of the presentation. The left side of the presentation talks about the different events, the different major events that had happened across the world. And so again, no part of the world is safe. It is not that this is a phenomena which only happens, say, across the European markets or say across the North American markets. No, it happens everywhere. Wherever there is data available, there are hackers available, and hackers will ensure that they come after your data and then try to take advantage of your data through ransomware attacks and through hacks. Now, let me talk about a journey that can happen and the different costs that can be associated with a cyber attack. And then you'll understand some of these points when I talk about the coverages later. So, for example, if you see the data breach journey, if there's a security breach at the very bottom, what will you do? And I'll take this example with some organization examples. The company will appoint forensic experts. So, for example, if the SBI bank's website is hacked, obviously then the company will have to appoint forensic experts. These forensic experts then will start working very closely with the IT team to understand why the data breach had happened and how did it happen. So whenever this happens, you'll have to then have a fees for those forensic experts, because these are all outside vendors that you've hired, experts that you've hired. Once a breach happens, then a lot of your data gets exposed to the public. So it becomes mandatory for the bank to ensure that the information goes to all the customers. So a public announcement of that breach has to happen. A public announcement can happen through TV, a public announcement can happen through newspaper advertisements, and also you will then be required to hire public relationship firms and PR agencies who will have to take care of your announcement services. Now, if you have to reach out to, say, for example, if a million users were exposed and a million of the users' data was exposed, you will then have to reach out to all these users through SMSs, through calls. You'll have to notify them. You have to tell them that this has happened. Don't worry, your data is safe, not safe, whatever. But a lot of then transaction cost goes into that. And that's when the expense to notify the customer comes into the picture. Once this happens, then obviously the banks will also have to require to do some sort of a credit monitoring offer, where they will then start monitoring the data. They will start monitoring the data of these million users who are affected. And because this happens, then there is obviously a cost that goes into this. So, if you look at this complete journey, there is not a single part where the cost is smaller. A cost is something which you can bear from your revenue or from your profits. The cost can be very large if there are multiple litigations against you. For example, if you look at the last part of the journey, where there can be where there can be legal actions by, say, third party, or actions by a regulatory investigation agency, the legal cost can be very high. Say a notification cost might be a smaller amount, but the legal implications can be very, very high. All of this will come out from your profits. All of this will come out from your revenue. So, it becomes, like I said, and I've been saying it multiple times, becomes very, very important that we have a cyber liability insurance to take care of this. Now that we have discussed the multiple scenarios in terms of what can be the triggers, what can be the events that can cause the cost, let's talk about the coverages. Before I talk about the coverages, a cyber liability insurance has three parties: first party, second party, third party. A first party is you, somebody who's taking the insurance. Second party is the insurance company who's providing you the insurance, who's telling you that whenever and if there is an event of a cyber attack, I'm there to protect you. That's the second party. Third party is everybody else. A third party can be the shareholders, the government body, the employees, your own employees, your ex-employees, your customers, your service providers, your vendors. Everybody else is a third party. For a bank, all the retail customers, all their service providers, everybody else is a third party. So now that we are clear on who's the first party, who's the second party, who's the third party, let's talk about the coverages in some more details. I'll talk about the first party coverages first. And like I said, the first party coverage means losses and expenses that have been borne, that have to be borne directly by you. So let's look at each of these coverages. I'll try to be as simplified, or I'll try to simplify this as simply as possible, so that you understand each of these coverages, you understand each of these scenarios. And if there are doubts, I will also make sure that I again brief them in case if anybody has a doubt. So under the first liability coverage, the first is e-theft loss. And like the word says, so first what I'll do is I'll read out each of these sentences first, and then I'll talk about each of these through examples. E-theft loss as a consequence of having transferred funds due to fraudulent input, either in computer system or network. Like the word says, theft, it's a loss. Somebody has stolen money from your account. So it can be, you have given your email ID and password of your organization to an employee or to a service provider, or you had misplaced it and or it can also be due to negligence, you had left it. And if then there is a fund transfer, that then directly comes under a e-theft loss. The next is e-communication loss. E-communication loss, this generally happens when there is a fraudulent communication used by the scamster or by the hacker to ensure that the payment gets paid to their account. A typical and a very, very simple example would be your emails have got hacked, and because you were required to make, say, a large amount of sum to one of your service providers or to your one of your vendors, and because somebody hacked into your account, into your emails, they kept everything identical. They changed the account details, and because nobody gets into so many details as to double check or triple check the account details, you made the payment because everything else sounded right. That kind of a loss comes under e-communication loss. E-threat loss. E-threat loss is a threat. So in very, very simple words, it is, agar aap itna paisa hame nahi denge, we will then ensure that your systems are down or we cause further damages. So if you don't pay this much amount of money to us, 1,000 bitcoins or $1,000, we will ensure that your system doesn't get started, or even if it starts, you'll have to then put in a lot of money and time into that. This is called as a ransomware attack. And majority of the time, this is what kicks in. So first, if there's a cyber attack, this is after they've breached all your systems, they've put all your systems down, they have made all your systems hacked, they then start asking for a ransomware amount. That's the amount, that's the loss that comes under a e-threat loss. E-vandalism loss is when you have to bear a cost or you have to put in a cost for recovering this data. So another example, for example, somebody said, if you don't pay me $1,000 amount, I will then start deleting your data. In that case, for example, there are two scenarios. One, you pay everything upfront, and then the person does not delete anything. He gives you access to the system, and you're okay. In that case, you'll then only be you're able to claim, or the insurance company will pay you that $1,000. The second case can be, you negotiated. You said, I will not pay $1,000. Instead, I will pay, say, $400. And then because the hacker was unhappy, he also took that ransomware amount of $400, but then he started corrupting and deleting your data. And in order to recover that data, you had to then, say, subsequently bear another $200. In that case, the insurance company will pay you both for the ransomware attack, which is the e-threat loss, and also for the vandalism loss, which is your data recovery cost. So multiple overlapping losses will also be borne by the insurance company. Please remember that. Last, e-business interruption. It's a loss of profit when the business is down. So when your business is down, when your servers are down, when your complete system is on hold, within minutes, you will start having financial losses in terms of a revenue loss. Do understand, the company will not pay you for the revenue loss. They will instead pay you for the net profit loss. And obviously, because of that, whenever you're taking a cyber liability insurance, there will be multiple questions as to, for example, if there's a cyber attack, in how many minutes or in how many hours or in how many days will your system be back? If you say that within an hour or within 2 hours my system will be back, then the risk is low to you. While somebody says that it probably take me 20 days to get my system live because I'm so dependent on everything online and my systems are so online dependent, then you fall under the risk category. So again, not divulging, but then these are the different losses that are under a first party loss. Now, these are the loss that you have borne directly, but then there will also be expenses for you, who you will have to bear directly. Those are the last three parts. So I hope I'm clear. The first 5 were the losses that you had to bear directly because of the cyber attack. It can be a ransomware attack, it can be a data corruption, it can be theft from your accounts, etc. So these are your direct losses. The last three fall under the direct expenses. So understand difference, loss and expense. The last three are, now the first part is privacy notification expense. This includes the cost incurred for making a communication to inform the public or affected customers. Like I said, typical example, a bank, say for example, ICICI Bank had a breach, and then they had to incur a large amount of money to send out SMSs, to make calls, to hire agencies. All of that cost gets covered under the privacy notification expense. Crisis expense, this kicks in when, for example, you'll have to hire public relationship consultants. You'll have to hire brand managers to ensure that your brand does not get affected, or the cost impact to your brand is minimum. For example, again, ICICI Direct, you might have to hire then public relationship consultants who will then have to give ads in newspapers to tell everybody, all the customers, all your retail customers, that everything is fine. You will be live again. The impact was minimum, etc. So all of that cost gets borne under the crisis expenses. The last part is the reward expenses. This happens when, say, example, you're sure that this was the job that was done by one of your employees. It can be a former or a current employee, and that that if I give a reward amount, probably the identification of that person might happen sooner. The hacker might then be able to identify, and if the hacker gets identified, then you might not have to pay the $1,000 which he's asking, and the reward amount might be lesser. So it's that's a decision that you can take, but reward expenses are also borne by the insurance company. So this slide talked about all the different expenses and losses that you had to incur directly as the first party. This slide talks about the damages and litigations that can happen on you through third-party sources. And remember, when I spoke about third party is everybody else. Your service providers, your customers, your clients, the government bodies, regulatory bodies, everybody else. Now, under this, again, there are different costs. Disclosure liability. A disclosure liability is, and I'll give a simple example. For example, you're an organization which is into healthcare, and your organization captures a lot of data of celebrities. So, for example, if a private information related to one of the celebrity gets exposed, that is, so say for example, if Virat Kohli's current address, that information gets leaked to the public. So there can be a litigation by Virat Kohli. That cost gets covered under disclosure liability. So I hope I'm clear. Disclosure liability is where the private information of your customers, of your service providers, of anybody, that goes to the public, and if there are litigations by private people whose information has been leaked, that amount then gets covered under disclosure liability. Content liability, very simple, includes claims for intellectual property, trademark, copyright. So if there are copyright infringement, if there are trademark disputes, if all of that data gets exposed, and if there are litigations by service providers, then that gets covered under content liability. Reputational liability, very similar to disclosure liability, but then this deals with reputation. Again, same example, you are into, say, a healthcare, your organization is into healthcare, and you capture a lot of critical data, say related to all the critical information, who has AIDS, who has cancer, who's not well, who's unwell, and so a lot of data which might impact the brand of the person. So, for example, if one of the celebrities has AIDS, and if that information comes out in the public, then a lot of his brand endorsements might take a hit. So if that person then decides to sue you, that cost comes under your reputation liability. Conduit liability in very simple terms is when your third party systems also get impacted by your system. So for example, Oyo has many hotel chains tied with their system. If, for example, Oyo's system gets hacked, if there is a cyber attack on Oyo's systems, somebody, a hotel chain, which is say 1,000 kilometers, say in Rajasthan, in Bikaner, then their servers and systems, if they are also impacted by the trojans or by the malware, then any litigations that these partners will file against Shoyo will be taken care. That's in simple terms what comes under a conduit liability, where third-party systems which are integrated with you, which are dependent on you, they get impacted by the security system failure. Fifth one, sorry, impaired access liability. This deals with the customers. So for example, ICSA Direct. ICSA Direct has so many users who use their systems between 9:30 to 3:30. If there's a cyber attack, and because there's a cyber attack, and obviously because there's a cyber attack, their servers are down for a particular period, and during that particular period, a customer was unable to do transactions which were very critical to him. And because of that, he feels there is obviously a financial loss to that customer. And if that customer then decides to file legal suit against ICSA Direct, that cost gets borne by the insurance company under this particular coverage, which is impaired access liability. Defense cost is all that cost that you will require to defend yourself. If there are any of these above claims, if any of these claims like a disclosure liability, a content liability, a reputational liability, impaired access liability, if there are any of the claims regarding all of these above, all of that defense cost, hiring a lawyer, then the claims regarding all of that comes under the defense cost. I hope I'm clear in terms of the coverages, both your first party coverages and your third party coverages, and also hope I'm clear on the difference between the cost or the losses and the expenses in your first party and the different losses that you might have to bear in the third party coverage. If there are any questions, please feel free to type them in the comment box, and I will then take them separately once I'm done with the presentation. Now, what is not covered? These are standard exclusions across the insurance companies, and the wordings might be different, but then the exclusions are simple. The exclusions are standard. Any bodily injury and property damages are not covered. Cyber liability insurance only covers financial losses. It does not cover bodily injury and property damage. So there are different insurances for that. Your commercial general liability insurance, your workman compensation. So those are the ones that cover your bodily injury and property damages. But a cyber liability insurance only covers financial losses. If there's a contractual liability, if there's a contractual agreement between you and a service provider, and if there's a failure from either of the sides, and if there's a breach of the contract, contractual liability litigations are not covered in cyber liability. Criminal acts are not covered. Trading losses are not covered. If your organization is doing unauthorized data collection of any type, and then even if there's a cyber attack, your claims then become null and void. Also, in the time of a war and terrorism, no insurance is applicable. And hence, generally, if there are terrorisms and war, insurance companies deny to make claims. So these are all the standard exclusions that fall under a cyber liability policy. Now I'll take two different examples. Please understand them so that we know or you understand the coverages and you understand under which of these categories does this claim fall. So let me read it out. I'll read it out slowly. I will then try making you understand under which category does it fall. First, data breach. A private healthcare clinic was the victim of a cyber attack in which patient information was stolen from their computer system. The hackers threatened to post the data publicly unless they received a ransom payment of 13,000 rupees, 13,000 bitcoins. They contacted their cyber insurer, who helped the healthcare clinic IT team immediately fix the vulnerability. A local IT forensic specialist began verifying the hacker's claim and was able to confirm that data related to 3,000 odd patients had been compromised. However, this was a data which was related to names and addresses only, and thus, not a very critical data. So ultimately, it was decided that they would not pay the ransom. Instead, their insurer connected the healthcare clinic with a crisis communication consultant who helped them notify all affected parties. They did not hear from the hackers again. The cost of the IT forensic team and the crisis communication company were both covered under the cyber liability insurance. So remember the first party expenses that we spoke of, the expenses, all of that gets covered here. Now, for example, if the client would have decided to make a payment, say instead of 13,000 Bitcoins, they would have decided to make whatever, it can be 13,000 Bitcoin or it can be 5,000 Bitcoins. That would have then been covered under your first party liability under your direct losses. So please understand, had the client, had this healthcare clinic not taken a cyber liability insurance, all these expenses that they had to bear, even if it was not direct, even if it was a communication expense and crisis communication consultant expenses, that would have gone directly from your revenue, that would have gone directly from your profits. So becomes very important that we have a cyber liability insurance in place. Another example, business interruption. A food trucking company suffered a ransomware attack in which their data was encrypted and the cyber criminal demanded a ransom of 10,000 odd dollars for the decryption key. The company found themselves unable to access their routes, logistic information, contacts, payment card processing capabilities. So, in a way, they became completely handicapped. The CEO refused to pay the demand, and they set about reconstructing the data from paper records, employee knowledge, etc., etc. Obviously, this then resulted in extensive overtime cost in addition to their losses of business income. Now, what did the company pay? What did the insurance company, the second party, pay here? After adjustment of their cyber insurance claim, they were able to recover nearly all of their financial loss thanks to the cyber policy. So here, what the example is saying is all your net profit loss was paid by the insurance company. Again, like I'm saying, had they budged, had they paid the ransomware attack, the insurance company would have been liable to pay both the 10,000 odd dollars and also the loss that had happened. Say, for example, in spite of paying the 10,000 odd dollars, the ransom attack guys did not immediately give you the decryption keys. Instead, they took, say, 10 odd hours to do that. And in those 10 odd hours, if there was a revenue loss and subsequently a net profit loss, the insurance company would have been liable to pay both your net profit loss of the business that you would have missed out in those specific duration and also the ransomware attack loss. Prerequisites for a cyber liability insurance. What is required to take a cyber liability insurance? And this becomes applicable both for when you're a first-time buyer and also if you're continuing a policy year on year. Especially for a first-time buyer, it becomes important that you fill a proposal form. Different insurance companies have different proposal forms. These are standard proposal forms where they ask you multiple information regarding your businesses, your plans, your details of your organization, where is the business placed, which all locations and which all geographies is your business. They will then ask you a detailed information about your IT security plan. How is your security in place of your IT business? Then the business continuity plan, and the business continuity plan then obviously has a direct impact on your revenue losses. So business continuity plan then deals with details about, say, if your business fails because of a cyber attack and is not live in what time. It can be an hour, 10, depending on the questionnaire that they will give you. And then there are multiple questions that the insurance companies will have. So again, overall, it's not a very, very long or logistically difficult part to take a cyber liability insurances. Insurance companies have these basic and formal formalities to ensure that the right information gets captured and to ensure that the claim gets payable and there is no chance that the insurance companies can reject your claims. That is the reason all of this information gets captured or is taken by the insurance companies initially from you. Thank you so much. This was a very, very brief presentation on cyber liability insurance. We have close to 15-20 odd minutes available now for questions. If there are questions, please feel free to ask. So there are some questions. Let me take them. Okay, so there is one question. It'll be great if you could cover how cyber threat insurance premiums are calculated, basically based on what parameters. So that's a question by the audience. Now to give you some ballpark numbers, ballpark calculations, the way it works is, for example, there is a minimum amount. So obviously there is not a minimum amount per se, but then for example, for a $1 million sum assured, which is close to 7 odd crores of sum assured, the premiums would be in the range of 3 to 4 lakh rupees. That's a very ballpark number in terms of the sum assured versus the premiums. Also, it depends a lot on the questionnaire, a lot on the business plan, a lot on your IT infrastructure. It also depends on lot on the industry. For example, if there are industries like the manufacturing where the security information and the server information, the security is not very tight, say in comparison to a healthcare organization or in comparison to a IT organization, where the security details, the security encryption, etc., are much more higher and of much more value. So, there are multiple avenues, but a ballpark number, like I said, for a 7 crore odd sum assured, the premiums would be anywhere in the range of 3 lakhs to 4 lakhs. The premiums can obviously be brought down if you have a higher excess or a higher deductible. Deductibles are the basic operational expenses that the insurance company will deduct and then make the payment. For example, in ransomware attack, if your total claim is of a crore and the excess is, for example, of a lakh rupees, the amount that will get paid to you is a crore minus a lakh rupees. So if you have higher deductibles, obviously then the premiums also go down. But like I said, it becomes, it is your decision on how do you customize your policy, but makes sense that if you're taking a policy, you cover all the coverages, the first party, the third party, and also the deductibles are lower so that maximum amount gets paid to you. Okay, there is another question. Okay, now there is also to now adding to that part. So before I go to the next question from Shubha Sarkar, let me also talk about how is the premium calculated? So more than premium, is the sum assured dependent on the revenue? Yes, it depends on the revenue. So a lot of times what happens is the insurance companies will ask you, what is the maximum loss that you can incur because of one event that can happen? And for example, you say that the revenue loss because of that particular event can be 10 crores, while your overall top line for year might be 100 crores. Then the sum assured that you might take with the possibility that this event can happen minimum once a year, the minimum sum assured then you should take is at least 10 crores. While it is recommended that the sum assured should be higher than 10 crores because the possibility of multiple chain events happening or multiple cyber attacks happening throughout the year are there. But the worst attack that can happen and the damages in terms of revenue that can happen to you are because 10 crores. Hence, in such a scenario, even if your turnover is for 100 crores, it makes sense for you to take a sum assured of 10 crores. Okay, so there was one more question. The question was from Shubha Sarkar. Can you please tell me if I don't have server in-house, how to take insurance? So see, like I said, for example, if you're talking about a retail insurance and for an individual insurance for yourself, there are insurances that are provided by insurance companies for individual retails also. you don't need a server. This, for example, will then protect you against phishing attacks, fraud, email hacking attacks, you as an individual. So even if you don't have a business running, but then this will then protect your personal income. So you don't need a server to take a cyber insurance. Servers, data system, encryption, etc. comes into the picture when you have an organization running. But if you don't have an organization running, and if you're an individual retail customer like me, and you want to protect your online transactions, you want to protect your hacking of your account, you want to protect phishing, then it becomes important that you take a retail cyber insurance for yourself. Ankur Agarwal has a question. Consider a scenario. A past employee of a service provider leaks some data of a customer organization, and customer organization makes a claim of XYZ on service provider due to this data leak. To what extent can insurance help in such a case? So I'll repeat the question again. Ankur says, let's assume a past employee of a service provider, so not of your organization, but of a service provider, has leaked information related to the customers. And then the customers make a claim of XYZ on the service provider due to this data leak. So here, please understand the cyber liability policy, because you're the first party, you're the primary insured person. In case if you want to cover your subsidiaries, you can then cover. But if there is a service provider, the service providers have to take a cyber liability insurance for themselves. But let me give an example in terms of the data leak that you've spoken of. So if one of the employees of this service provider or a third party would have leaked the data of your organization, and because of that, if there are litigations against you as an organization from other service providers, from other vendors, from your customers, in that case, all of that litigations, all of those legal suits that are filed, those claims are admissible under the cyber liability policy, condition that the data breach, the hacking, the malware attack, the Trojan attack should have happened on your systems, and because of that, the